From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Studying Digital Marketing. In this podcast, I sit down with my good friend, Mr. Todd Jones, and we in a segment called Copywriting with Todd Jones. This segment is a bi-weekly segment on every second Monday that we do. Today's topic is all about your business origin story. Sit back, relax, grab a drink, and enjoy the conversation. This podcast is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency that can help protect your WordPress website today. Go to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and see what we can do to help you protect your business investment. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. And in today's podcast, we have Copywriting with Todd Jones. How are you today, Todd?
Not too bad. I can't complain. I've gotten some steps in and had some chicken wings for lunch, and so good to go.
Good. Today, I thought we'd talk about origin stories in the sense of copywriting. So why are they important?
Well, I was telling you in the green room there that I wrote down this list, and I need to write an article about it. Which the points I want to give you about origin story is going to become an article. But first, I would say, if we're talking about an origin story for a company or for an organization, and I think that people want that origin story for the same reason they want to know about, any human would want to know a story about someone. You meet somebody the first time, so tell me about yourself. So it's just natural curiosity, like, what makes us who we are. And I think that's true with a business as well. And so a couple weeks ago, I was able to be on a podcast by David Garfinkel, and he's a veteran copywriter, and he put out a post, and he's got a book called Persuasive Storytelling. Very good book. I recommend it to anyone listening. Easy read, but it's very, very valuable. And anyway, in the course of promoting the book, he puts out this tweet. I saw it a while back. And that meme that goes around, how's it going, how it started, and how's it going? That meme? They'll have basically a before and after picture. So if we were doing one of Rob, there would be a Rob of when he was in his 20s and a Rob now. How's it going, or how it started and how's it going? Like those memes have gone around. Well, he says, and I think he's right, this is basically an origin story, a very simplistic version of an origin story. An origin story showcases your journey both as a solopreneur or entrepreneur and as a company. So I think that's important. It showcases something you have overcome, especially as a company. And if we want to throw solopreneurs in there as well, usually, especially if you start a company based on a product, you have overcome you have solved some kind of problem. I have worked with and interviewed startup companies in the past, and that's like the central part of how they got started. They found a gap in the market about something, and they set out to solve it. Actually, you and I and Ryan were talking about North Commerce, which is a fairly new e-commerce platform built on WordPress. They felt there was a gap in the market because there was no real competition with WooCommerce. And so they set out to solve that problem. So we'll see in 5 years, how that worked. But it's one of those things that, in fact, the guy who started North Commerce, he actually has a manifesto on his website. I was astonished and delighted. We'll talk about that in a future episode about having a manifesto. But so origin story can help people see how you went from where you are to where you are now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Another thing, go ahead.
Should your origin story be written as in text? Could it be video as in a video? Could it be audio as in a podcast? Or should it be all of the above?
Yeah, I would go with all the above, but I think sometimes it's best to start with a written because you see it visually, right? It's on the paper. Now, that being said, I know that it's not always easy to do. Some people are not good writers. Sometimes people think faster than they can write. Go ahead and fire up the video camera and start with the most basic, raw. This is the story. This is how it went. In fact, when I did the origin story for you, that's what you did. You submitted a video to me, which I was able to take and create a written version of your origin story. But I think as far as an official origin story goes, I think you start with the written so that you can determine the story arc that you're going to use, and then from there you it's just like anything else that you create online. You're going to distribute it various channels. So a video with you talking about it is a great thing to do. I think it's a great format. Obviously, you can put it on YouTube. You can use it. I've seen people use some version of origin story for video ads, both on TV and online. Absolutely do that. I like the audio podcast thing as well. And I think I work with Main WP, and I've been working on trying to create something for them as well. And up until now, most of that has been audio, if you will. Basically, Dennis either in an article or on a podcast telling like how it happened. And I've gone through all those resources to pull out various details to create the origin story. In past, especially maybe 100, 200 years ago, that's probably how we were telling the origin stories. It's an auditory deal, like we pass it around, that way. So I think the answer to that question is yes.
It's all about too repurposing your content, right? So if you've got it written, you should be
Mhm.
able to translate that into a video, into a podcast,
Yep.
into a forward in a book, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
too many people
Yeah, I
don't.
would even love to see people do documentary style videos on their origin stories. You've got to have the stuff there to do it with. I mean, if you've only been in business a couple of years, that's not going to work. But if you've been in business 20, 30 years, you very likely, even if you've rapidly grown in 10 years, you could likely do some sort of an origin story in a documentary style format that you put on YouTube, that's put on maybe your about page or something like that. Absolutely see that as a great thing to do. So repurposing it, distributing it to different channels. It is about repurposing. It's also about distributing your content in various channels, because you may have a presentation coming up for your company, and you may need to tell people, because after all, you're trying to explain why they should buy the product from you or use your service. And you may do 2 or 3 slides in that deck on your origin story about your company, how you went from how you started to where you are now. A great place to get origin stories is Shark Tank.
Yeah.
Those folks come in to the sharks, and often they tell the origin of how the product that they're trying to sell began. As a great place to hear origin stories.
I also think clips out of your origin story should be on your PR page or your media page as well, because that's where people are trying to find out about
Yeah,
you, other things like articles, podcast interviews, and so on.
right. Yeah, and so I absolutely. I think certainly if you're a solopreneur or a freelancer, we talk about bios. That's essentially an origin story, right? So I think the best thing to do is to have, first of all, like just build out your origin story, no matter how long it is, and it won't be that long. Occasionally, you'll have one that basically becomes a memoir, but that's not what we're trying to do. You're trying to get it all out there. And that's the best thing to do. And then find a way to have three different, I guess, formats, not really formats, but links. You have your condensed short one, which would be similar to a bio, which you could put on a media page, like what you're talking about, or a feature page. And then you have maybe a medium link one might serve as the core of your about page, or you just have a page on your history of your company or whatever. That would be the core of it. And then you have a longer one, which could be used in many different ways, but it certainly have it documented, but it could be used to create. This is something I don't think I've ever seen anybody do, but a little ebook, like, because people are going to want to know. And, I'm not talking about a 50-page ebook. I'm talking about three customer, maybe your success stories. Have a copy of it in an ebook form, a little bit long, a little bit longer, maybe a little bit more detail, that kind of thing. And then it's something that's downloadable. So somebody who wants to dig into that a little bit more. Actually, I have a book, and I think you have it too. I think it was by Drip or Drift, and they did what I call a pivot on conversational marketing. I think that's the one. I'm not sure. It was something, but anyway, the very first of the book was all about how they started out doing one thing and they switched to something else because the use case of how the customers were using the product, they pivoted to move in that direction. I call that a pivot story. So yeah, you can use that in the front of a book as well. If you put out a book that really is like the linchpin of your brand, that could actually be an early part of that book or the first chapter or even a prologue. So absolutely, I think that's a great idea.
What are the major components that should go into the origin story if you're writing?
Well, let me finish telling some of the things that I think is a reason for an origin story, and then we'll get into some of the things that put in your origin story. One of the things I think it does is it shows your company's purposes and values. It's kind of reveals like why you are, what your purpose is. And so I tell people, think about your favorite comic book and the villains and the superheroes, especially the villains. Because it's kind of like, why is the villain wanting to kill everybody? Why is the villain so mean? Well, there's a reason. And you in the comic book series will tell that origin story of why Luke's Lex Luthor is so bad or whatever. I think it also creates trust. And when they see all this, they become connected to you, especially if there's something that they identify well with as well. But also, I think there's an element of people want to physically and metaphorically see you, and metaphorically would be the story. They want to be. So I was having a conversation with a friend about people online not showing their image, and in 2024, that just seems, especially if you're kind of in the business world, it just seems untrusting to not show a picture of who you are. And I think not revealing at least something as a company, about how you started, I think people trust you more whenever they know something about you.
Yeah,
And then the last thing I will say on all this is, and this is kind of loosely tied, but I don't know, nostalgia. We are nostalgic, and I'm nostalgic, and I'm going to tell you two things I've watched recently, which connects me to my childhood. The first is the Bionic Woman. You remember Lindsay Wagner?
I do.
Man, yep, the Bionic Woman. Now, of course, I watched the $6 billion Man as well. But I was instantly transported to being 8 years old watching that, like really. And then the other thing I watched in the last few days is the Lone Ranger. Now, that was made when my dad was a kid, but when I was a kid, I would go in at 6 a.m. in the morning and watch those reruns with him. And so nostalgia, I mean, even, as a company, like there's a lady, the Stuckey's chain of convenience stores, they've kind of fallen, on the scale to Bucky's a little bit. Well, the lady is she's the heir and she's the CEO, is going everywhere and kind of revitalizing the brand of Stuckey's. And there's a lot of nostalgia with that. Just like if you go into a Cracker Barrel, I don't know if you've ever been in a Cracker Barrel, but they will put things in there that you may have played with or watched or listened to as a kid. So nostalgia is huge. And I think people, especially if the company's older and maybe you can connect it back to your childhood, I think nostalgia can be very powerful in that regard. So, okay, what things go into your origin story? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, but I wanted to address, before we go there, I wanted to address
Sure.
one thing. You said when you were talking about things to show, to connect with you and to see you and to read you. And I truly think as a business, this is more important today with all the AI problems with fraud out there and everything else. And one of the biggest problems people have today is they do business or try to do business with people without getting to know them. And I think the origin story helps you get to know somebody, and that is really important as well.
I think it's a starting point, right? And to go further, because I think what you're going to see moving forward because of AI, and certainly AI has so many things that we use for. I'm in perplexity all the time, and I use some other ones as well for certain things. But companies, um, I think customer experience is going to be a huge thing going forward, more so. So, what do we complain about every week? Some month of a company doing something and really not having a good experience and not a good customer service. So I think, in fact, my friend Brittany Hodak, who is all about customer experience and is a consultant with many companies across the country for that, she has a little framework, and the S is super fans, but the S stands for story. You tell them your story, you get started. And so she kind of validates what you're saying, I think, in the sense that it starts with, to have a good customer experience, to create super fans, people need to know who you are. They're not going to be a super fan of a nameless company, a faceless company. So that's my opinion. Now, the big companies, that are famous, faceless, and nameless, they do a great job of putting other faces in front of us to represent them, right? Immediately, I'm thinking about Progressive. I don't even use Progressive, but I know Flo, right? She's the head person, the one in the commercials, and then I know Jamie, the goofball. They kind of represent Progressive, and you feel like you know them, right? You know somebody like them. Maybe you are like them. And then I'm always a big fan of Limu, Emu, and Doug. I know a lot of people think that's a silly commercial, but I loved it. I think it's great. And this is a nameless, faceless insurance company, both of them, and they have done a great job of creating. I don't say trust, but they have given a face to their company in the terms of these commercials with characters and so forth. Same with State Farm, and I actually do use State Farm, and I've told my agent several times, I said, if Jake ever comes to Conway, I'd like to hang out with him. I really would. I think he's cool. So there you go.
Yeah, I think that's a biggie. We've talked about uses for origin stories. We've talked about components of an origin story. What else?
Well, you asked me about like what should be in an origin story,
Yeah.
and um, you know, I I I'm not gonna say I change my opinion all the time, but when I do a new one, it's kind of like, oh yeah, okay. So I think a good origin story centers around an event, and it'll always work out that way because sometimes what we have is the history, basically, A good word for that is historiography. That's kind of what we did with yours. It's kind of in the past, I've consulted people, and that's basically what we did. A historiography that is really great for solopreneurs and entrepreneurs who have done many things and so forth. There's really not a scene specifically, but sometimes there are scenes. Um, but I think if you are able to show how you overcame something, for Rob Cairns, one of the things I found interesting in your story was that when you were in college, you had a professor to turn you off marketing completely, never
Yeah.
wanted anything to do with it, swore it off. And now you're a veteran digital marketer. It's like, how does that happen? Well, here's the story. Here's how it happened. There's a lot of other stuff involved in that, like your computer love background, that kind of stuff. But it was fascinating to me. And so I worked with someone else who's a solopreneur, and we looked at some of the things in his past that kind of set him where he is now. But sometimes when it comes to a solopreneur, you don't have just one interesting thing or one thing that kind of connects. Now, when you're a company and you're doing an origin story, almost always there is something that led to starting it. Paul Mitchell, hair, the guy who did the hair products and all that kind of stuff. That's a fascinating story, and I can't actually remember it right now, but if you go look it up, it's a really fascinating story. So, essential part of their history. LL Bean, that was a guy who when he would go out in the wild, his shoes weren't holding up, so he decided to make some boots, and he actually failed the first time. He had to give people all their money back and start over and do it again. And now LL Bean is the most well-known outdoor gear in the country, probably the world, at least North America. In fact, I don't know about every news station across the country, but I noticed that the ABC one here in Little Rock, they always have LL Bean gear on when they're out. So if they're like it's a winter or rain or whatever, you can always the reporter's wearing something that says LL Bean. So they obviously go out and get LL Bean stuff. It's supposed to be known for keeping you dry. And so LL Bean has an interesting founding story. There's always something, and of course I learned some in Kendra Hall's book, Stories That Stick. And the one that stuck out to me, she was doing a consult with a company that built very premium price homes and buildings, that kind of stuff. High end, like not your average stuff. And so they got paid really well for what they did. And they were going through that, and really she was having a hard time finding something. And she discovered that this guy who started the company when he was a kid, when everybody else was playing baseball and all this other stuff, he was actually building something. He was building a fortress. He was building a birdhouse. He was building something in his backyard. He was always building as a kid. And it was like a foregone conclusion he was going to build. And she centered on that, even though it's not really specifically a part of the history of the company, but it was the thing that was the spark that got him to where he was. I mean, there's so many interesting ways you can do that. But I think any story should have how you overcame something. I think that is important as much as possible. So you might go like, okay, well, we started this thing, right? We started this business. And in year two, we had this problem and we almost had to close the doors. And I consulted a marketing expert. His name is Rob Cairns, and he built us a website, and we started getting traffic and started able to sell through our website. And that's what I'm talking about. And then you have the pivot story, right? The stories of the company that they're going down one direction, it's actually not working at all. And they find out that this is why it's important to find out what your customers are doing with your product. They find out the customers using it for something totally different. They pivot the company, and the rest is history. There's all these different ways of building that story. I like to have dialogue as much as possible. There's always some kind of dialogue in a story. Either it's between two different people in the story, or it's between the narrator and the person reading. I think it's better if you have 2 or 3 people in the story who are talking to each other. Dialogue, I think, just kind of adds to it.
Interesting thoughts. Is there anything else that you wanted to sort of mention around origin stories stuff?
Well, I have a worksheet I use when I start an origin story, and really it's a lot of spelunking, like diving in and digging in and trying to find the nuggets in somebody's story. Sometimes you find out that the origin story that you use is not exactly always how, in your case, it was the founder story of studying digital marketing. You are the founder, so it was really more centered around you. In smaller companies, that very well may be the case, right? There's it's a chicken tender place. We have one in Conway. I started out of Louisiana. The dog, he named it after his dog. The dog's name is Kane, and I just remember that because they have it up on the wall when you go in there. So sometimes your origin story may not be specifically the actual origin, but I think anything that feeds into that origin, whether it's their background as a builder when you're a kid, or you swore off marketing when you were in college because the professor was, or those kind of things really play into that origin story.
Yeah. Hey, Todd, thanks for talking about origin stories. If somebody wants to get a hold of you to talk origin stories, how's the best way?
Copyflight.com, or I'm on Twitter, TE Jones, and LinkedIn, and Facebook. Then you can send a message through the website as well, and actually have a offer for origin stories. You should find that when you go to the website.
Thanks, Todd. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye for now. This show is brought to you by StunningDigitalMarketing.com, your Toronto leader in digital marketing services. Not only do we protect your WordPress website, we can help you with your site, provide social media management for your business, or even do one-on-one consulting. To find out more, go to StunningDigitalMarketing.com. Very special thank you to Todd Jones for joining me on the SDM show with his bi-weekly segment, Copywriting with Todd Jones. Have a great day, everybody. Bye for now. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. I love you, and I think about you every day. For more information about Stunning Digital Marketing, your digital marketing experts, go to StunningDigitalMarketing.com or go to StunningDigitalMarketing.info to find out all the great places that Rob Cairns can be found on the web.